In your book, you showed how a few specific companies control the tools needed to make chips. And today, as AI grows super fast, the biggest roadblock seems to be packaging these advanced chips together and making high-speed memory. Are these new roadblocks giving certain countries more power, or does Asia still hold all the cards?
Well, many of the capabilities that are needed for packaging high-end memory chips together are also located in Asia. Many of the materials come from Japan. The know-how to produce high-end memory chips is concentrated in two Korean companies, SK Hynix and Samsung. And Taiwan's TSMC is still the world's leader at producing the processor chips that are then integrated with these new memory capabilities. So it's not exclusively in Asia, but certainly Japan, Korea, and Taiwan play critical roles in the supply chain.
Mhm. The US is spending billions to build new chip factories like TSMC's massive plant in Arizona. From a big picture view, is America actually succeeding at making its own chips, or will high costs and a lack of skilled workers keep the real power in Asia?
Well, the United States is going to become a much bigger player in the manufacturing of advanced chips. TSMC, for example, has publicly said that they intend for about a quarter of their advanced production to be in the United States in Arizona by the middle of the next decade. That's up from 0% just a couple of years ago. So that's a meaningful increase, but it doesn't mean that the United States will be independent when it comes to producing advanced chips. And there will still be, I think, deep collaboration between the United States on the one hand and Korea, Taiwan, and Japan on the other.
Mhm. America has been trying to stop advanced AI chips from going to China, but China is working hard to make its own technology instead. Are these US rules actually working to slow China down, or are they just forcing the world to split into two totally separate tech systems?
I think we've seen major impacts from the restrictions of the sale of advanced chip making tools to Chinese chip manufacturers. The companies in China that manufacture chips have actually fallen behind industry leaders, especially in Taiwan, when it comes to the ability to produce high-end AI accelerators. So those rules have had a meaningful impact. What's been less effective are the US limitations on the sale of chips themselves. And what we've seen is large-scale smuggling of chips produced by companies like NVIDIA into China, as well as into countries like Southeast Asia, which then rent cloud computing access to Chinese companies. And so I think to understand the efficacy of these controls, we really do need to separate the controls on the chip making equipment, which have been impactful, and those on the chips themselves, which have been less impactful.
So you don't see the immediate threat from China to take over the United States as the top AI chip maker?
Well, no, when it comes to AI chip making, China's far, far behind the capabilities of Taiwan in terms of manufacturing, as well as the United States in terms of design. Best estimates this year, China will produce a couple percentage points of global AI chip production. Almost all of the rest will be in Taiwan. So China's far away from catching up when it comes to AI chips.
Mhm. For allied countries like South Korea, who build essential memory chips but are caught between the United States and China, what is the best way to stay safe but still protect their economy?
Well, I don't think it's right to say that South Korea is caught between the United States and China. In fact, what you see is that across South Korean industry, not just in chips, but in petrochemicals and automobiles and shipbuilding, South Korean industry is being squeezed by tougher and tougher Chinese competition, which is enabled by the fact that the Chinese government has aggressively supported competing firms in these sectors. So zoom in on the chip industry. For a long time, memory chips were dominated by a small number of companies in South Korea and a little bit in Japan and the United States. Over the last couple of years, thanks to billions and billions of dollars in subsidies as well as ownership stakes, the Chinese government has built up two national memory champions, YMTC and CXMT, and they're now competing directly with Korean firms. And so Korean firms aren't squeezed between the US and China. They're primarily squeezed by Chinese competition. And it's only thanks to the extraordinary demand in AI that memory firms are doing well today. If they were still competing with Chinese firms for the commodity manufacturing that goes into many smartphone or PC chips, it'd be a much, much more negative environment for Korean chip makers.
It's a bit different question, but what is your view on recent enthusiastic views from the investors in the United States toward the South Korean chip makers such as SK Hynix?
Well, I think there's been a shortage of memory chips driven by the AI demand from the United States, and that's led to wild fluctuations in the price of memory chips. And as the price of memory chips has gone up, I think investors have had difficulty assessing how profitable these firms will be, not this year, they'll be very profitable this year, but in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years, because nobody knows what memory prices will be over a longer time horizon. And so the stock prices for these companies have also fluctuated wildly because it's become so difficult to predict these pricing dynamics.
Mhm. Earlier, we talked about how where the China is standing in the AI chips, and everyone now seems to be focusing on the super advanced AI chips. But China is making a lot of the older, simpler chips used in cars and appliances as well. Is the rest of the world depending too much on China for these basic everyday chips?
I think it's very dangerous. And we actually saw earlier this year in the case of a Netherlands-based but Chinese-owned company called Nexperia, the risks. This company was involved in a dispute between the Dutch and the Chinese governments, and China cut off access to selling the China manufactured chips abroad, and it caused disruptions to auto manufacturing in Europe, but also in Japan and elsewhere. And this shows how China not only can, but has weaponized its position in the semiconductor supply chain when it comes to legacy chips, and illustrates the risks of becoming increasingly dependent on Chinese providers.
Mhm. Is what is the way to mitigate this danger?
Well, my view is that Western countries should ring fence their critical industries and prevent them from sourcing components exclusively from Chinese firms or mandating dual sourcing for components to ensure that they don't become excessively dependent on Chinese providers.
Mhm. From geopolitics perspective, if the chip making in Taiwan is always a keen interest among the watchers, if chip making in Taiwan was suddenly stopped or blocked by any event, how long could the rest of the world keep making electronics before running out?
Well, it's still the case that the world depends fundamentally on chips manufactured in Taiwan, and any sort of disruption caused by China would be immensely costly to the world economy. Hundreds and hundreds of billions of dollars in many different countries, trillions of dollars in aggregate, impacting everything from smartphones and computers to medical devices, construction equipment. Across the board, manufacturing would face severe disruptions, which is why it's critical that the world let China know that any sort of disruptions that it causes would have huge costs, not just for the rest of the world, but also for China too.